right, welcome into Starting Five here on the Five Reasons YouTube channel. I'm Ethan Skolnick here with you at 8:30 in the morning, although that may not be when you're watching it. I want to thank our producer, Manny Chang. We'll be with you for the next 15 to 20 minutes. Going to do a few of these this week as we've got two teams from the local area in their respective conference finals, both as 8 seeds, the Miami Heat and the Florida Panthers. We'll get into the Panthers probably a little bit later in the week, maybe tomorrow. Today we are going to talk Heat. We are sponsored by our friends over at All Pro Construction Builders. Check them out at allproconstructionbuilders.com or All Pro Construction Builders on Instagram. Quality is their specialty. You know, down here in South Florida, there's always a storm coming. Make sure you got the storm windows, the storm doors. Also, if you need renovations in your house, they can handle it for you. They're fully licensed, certified contractors. Our friend Danny and the rest of his team down there at All Pro Construction Builders. It's a family business, and they use locally made products all the time. They're based down in Dade County. They can serve Monroe and Broward as well. I'm going to give you the phone number. I was going to spread this out. 305-484-4429. You would think I would know it because I hear from Danny during the Heat games. 305-484-4429. Reach out, mention 5 Reasons, and you'll get a discount, which certainly is helpful as you're doing those storm windows. And again, don't wait until the last minute because, you know, starting in August, you're going to start hearing those named storms. Also sponsored by our friends over at Prize Picks. Use the code 5, F-I-V-E. Get their special props. And had the Embiid prop yesterday. Surprisingly, didn't go under that one. That was half a point. Go to prizepicks.com. Use the code 5, F-I-V-E. Get that initial deposit matched up to $100. People ask me all the time, is this legal? Yes, it's legal in the state of Florida and many other states, including New York, California, etc. All you're doing is basically going up and down on props. It's pretty simple. You can play 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players together. They got the NFL futures props on there. You think Tyreek Hill's going to go over 1,350 yards and you're willing to wait. You can play that one because that seems like an easy over. But also, they got the NHL, MMA, boxing, baseball, much more on there. Use code 5, F-I-V-E. All right, the Miami Heat are back in the Eastern Conference Finals. It's the third time in 4 years. A familiar foe in there, the Boston Celtics. I think most of us with a brain, thank you for the donation early in the morning here. Most of us with a brain believed that Philadelphia would blow that yesterday. So, I mean, that was predictable. I mean, even when Philadelphia got off to a decent start, were you really expecting Harden, Rivers, and Embiid to come up big in a playoff game on the road? No. So even with the Celtics having a rookie coach, even though they went through some ups and downs this season, early in the year, they were tremendous offensively, like historically good. Brady Hawk and I did an episode on this. Like through the first 6 weeks of the season, it was drive and kick. They were spraying out the threes. They had 6 guys, not including Tatum and Brown, shooting better than 40% from 3 for most of the early part of the season. But then it started to cool down a little bit for Boston. It was kind of the opposite of last season and a couple seasons ago, where they got off to a slower start and then played better as they went. They had trouble getting into their offense when they brought Robert Williams back. They changed the way that they played a lot. They got better defensively, but worse offensively. But again, going into the playoffs, we thought that the only team that could really beat them would be Milwaukee. But of course, Miami took care of that. And so here we are again. And if you look at the Celtics right now, they're essentially playing 7 guys, even though they could play more. And I think one of the things that's going to be really interesting is how they start and who blinks first. So we got into that on last night's 5 on the Floor, which is up here on the podcast. Take us there, Kevin. We got into this on the podcast last night because there are a couple of different ways that both coaches can go. And, you know, Spoelstra says they like to impose their will on the opponent, but this may be a case where you've got to wait to see what Boston is leaning towards, because they were not starting Robert Williams. They were starting Derek White. They were playing more of a smaller sort of 5-out lineup. But then they put in Robert Williams to compete essentially with the Tucker Embiid lineup, and it worked for the last 2 games. And so if you're just going to stay with that and the Heat stay with what they've got, okay, that's fairly conventional. Kevin Love starts at the 4 next to Bam. Caleb Martin continues to come off the bench. Robert Williams starts. And Derek White continues to come off the bench. But if you do that, there are some matchup questions for Miami. Like, okay, you're going to leave Robert Williams pretty much alone, which means Love plays him. So, you know, and you've got Horford that you're looking at. Does Bam guard Tatum to start? That's one of the things that we got into last night. And are you just basically saying Jimmy is on Jalen for most of this series? So I think what is going to be a curious decision here for Spoelstra is, again, their best lineup against Boston is probably going to be starting Caleb Martin. That's my view. Playing Caleb as many minutes as possible. Because remember, and this is an overlooked factor here, everybody's talking about Hero, and I'm getting a lot of questions about Hero. Is Tyler going to be back? I was told he's ahead of schedule medically, but not to expect him this series. That's what I've reported, okay? But just as big an issue for Miami is Oladipo. Because if you look at the playoffs last year, Oladipo was fourth on the Heat in minutes against Boston. He played a lot of minutes. Why? Because they needed another guy to match up with the wings, right? Well, not Tatum, but Brown in particular, who we know has trouble dribbling. I love Jaylen Brown. I love his game. I love everything about the guy. Like, to me, you talk about 5 guys that you'd love to have on the Miami Heat, he would be one of them, all right? He can't really dribble. He's just not a great ball handler. And so Oladipo putting pressure on Brown last year was a big factor. But it's also Derek White. It's also Smart. And now it's also Brogdon. So they've got a lot of good perimeter players who do different things for them. Okay. And so Oladipo would have come in very handy in this series. So without Oladipo, to me, it means more minutes for Caleb Martin. Okay. But it also means some minutes for Haywood Highsmith. If you saw in the regular season games, Highsmith got a turn, right? And this comes in from Eternal. Eternal's got to get it in on Eternal, one of our playback hosts. Vic was putting Jason in jail in prison. He's going to be missed. Yeah, I think that's sort of an overlooked factor in the series is that you don't have Depot. So it's going to be, like I said, interesting to see if Spoelstra just says, you know what, screw it. We're going to start Caleb because we know we're going to play him a ton of minutes. And we're going to force them to adjust to us. And you see then if they take Robert Williams out of the starting lineup. The other question becomes for Spoelstra, who do you want to see out there more for Boston? I mean, do you want to see more or less Robert Williams? Because like I said, Boston's offense is not as good with Robert Williams, but Bam has had some issues attacking Robert Williams. So do you want to get Robert Williams off the floor as much as possible? You saw in the last series, Spoelstra did some things, including the hack of Robinson, to get Mitchell Robinson out of Bam's way when he was giving them some trouble. Might he do the same to try to get Robert Williams out of the way, which means, again, going smaller, playing Caleb and Haywood Highsmith more at the 4. I don't know what Kevin Love's role is in this series compared to the last one. I do think that his savvy, his playmaking, obviously his passing, and his shooting could come in handy, but unless it's against the 2 bigs, I don't know how you play him that much. He can't guard Tatum. Obviously, he's not going to guard Brown. So, I mean, you have to almost hide him on Horford a lot of the time. Al's a good player, man. And so Love's going to have to be up to that because I thought Al was a real key in the last series. He's become a really critical role guy late in his career. And so that's going to be, a task for Love as well. But I think when you look at this, you say, okay, the first series against Milwaukee, you kind of knew you have to control Giannis. You have to build the wall. You just hope that Holiday and Middleton don't beat you too much. You saw Brook Lopez kind of get off, right? They won the series anyway. The second series, I always said, was Milwaukee light, all right? And I said at the beginning, the one guy to be concerned about was Brunson, and that was right. But Brunson couldn't beat them by himself because Randall was so inconsistent, and Barrett we know is inconsistent, and they basically decided they would live with what Barrett gave them. In this series, it's kind of a combination of the 2 teams that they played before. Tatum obviously can be extraordinary. He was yesterday. He's had some really bad efficiency games against Miami, too. It happened in a back-to-back this year. They could not stop him. I forgot he get 50, something like that. In the first one, we had a watch party, so I wasn't paying too much attention. It was a tropical distiller, so, it happens. But then the next one, he was not efficient. You can get him into some of those games. Bam has gotten him into some of those games, okay? Brown is more consistent from an efficiency standpoint, but not from a touches standpoint. Sometimes it's weird, considering he's an all-NBA type player, that they forget about him at times, and they kind of force him to go get his own. The guards, there are just more of them than you saw against Milwaukee and against New York. There are just more guys, like I said, who can do different things. Brogdon, not there last year. That's a factor. My attitude on Marcus Smart is you let him shoot. That's been the winning strategy here. He's going to have a game. He's going to have a game where he makes 4 threes. and they're going to go crazy about Marcus Smart and all the rest of this. Just let him do it. It might be. I mean, again, you want to make it as tough as possible, but he cannot be your focus. He can't be, because he will shoot them out of it at some point. He's not a great three-point shooter once the volume starts to go up. This comes in from Jordan. Should they put Bam on Williams if he starts so they can help on anything aside? Well, that's the other thing. Okay, so if you're looking at Bam guarding Robert Williams, yes, you could put him on there because you keep Bam closer to the basket. But what are you doing with Tatum? Because then, are you putting Jimmy on Tatum? Okay, who are you putting on Brown? Are you putting Strus on Brown? Now, I think Max Strus is a huge key to this series. I said it last night on 5 on the Floor. He's a huge key to the series because Spoelstra's going to play him a ton. He played him a ton last year in the Eastern Conference Finals against Boston. We all remember the shot that was switched from a 3 to a 2. He trusts Max against this team in this situation because Max is physical, and he's going to give you a little bit more offensively. I think that the Max Duncan minutes are going to tilt even more towards Max in this series. Duncan is very difficult to play against this team. We have seen this over and over and over. They know how to get a switch on him. They know how to pick up the cheap fouls on him. It's going to be tough to play him. I do think he will play some because they need to stretch the floor, but I think you're looking at Max playing 35 minutes in this series consistently. I think that's the way I think Max and Caleb are going to get a ton of minutes. The Vincent Lowry situation is going to be game to game. But if Kyle looks as fresh as he looked in the last series, particularly towards the end of it, and now he's got 4 days off, it will tilt towards Kyle. It will tilt. Regardless of whether or not, Caleb starts. Caleb will close with Jimmy and Bam. I believe Strus will close, and I believe Lowry will close. I think that's going to be their primary closing lineup for this particular series. But would I be stunned if Haywood Highsmith gets a turn closing if he's defending really well? No. Spoelstra's going to have to be flexible because it's not so much he's coaching against a great coach. We don't know if Mazzulla is a great coach at this point. We don't. It hasn't been enough time to evaluate it. We'll get a better sense in this series. But he's coaching against a very flexible team from a personnel standpoint. There's a lot of different ways the Celtics can go. That's what makes them dangerous. They can play guys at all kinds of different positions. They can go 3 guards. They can go 2 bigs, play Tatum at the 3, play Tatum at the 4. They've got a lot of different guys who can handle. It's a very versatile team, even though it's not an especially deep team beyond the top 7. But Grant Williams is a guy to watch in this series, too. Really hasn't been a factor in the playoffs. Mazzulla kind of yanked him out of the rotation. He's a guy who wants a big extension. We talked about him as a possibility for the Heat. Grant Williams has hurt the Heat before, okay? And he can stretch the floor. Another guy that you have to guard. We'll see how much he plays in this series. So there's a lot of different options, a lot of different ways Boston can go. They're not as conventional as maybe New York is in that sense. You kind of know the way that they're going to defend. And I'm going to look at this here. Whoever's talking about Bam and Rob in this chat and watch the whole season, Bam averages 25 against Boston. Rob is washed. I don't know if washed is the right word. He's definitely diminished. He made a huge career mistake by rushing back and just shaving off the meniscus instead of getting a full repair. I mean, Dwayne Wade might still be playing if he hadn't done that in college. It's a mistake. I shaved my meniscus because I'm not playing high-level basketball, okay? But I think Rob Williams made an error there that's going to hurt him the rest of his career. He's not as explosive as he was before. I think when people are talking about Bam being afraid of Rob, I think they're talking about before. I agree with you. It's not as much this season. But Bam, we know, sometimes does shrink against bigger centers or more active above the rim bigger centers. So we need to see the Bam from game 6 against New York. And I said he's the key to this series. So why am I picking? Well, why am I right now picking the Celtics to win? And I haven't made a final decision on that, but I'm leaning Celtics in 7 at this point. And as Eternal is saying that right there, giving me the thumbs down. To me, some of it does come down to home court. And some of it does come down to the flexibility of the Celtics roster. But I could be convinced over the next couple of days that Miami can win this series. I think again, it's going to come down to Bam. It's going to come down to Bam. And you saw it in Game 6, and you saw the reaction in the locker room to Bam, whether it was you watched the Miami Heat videos that they put on Twitter or you just talk to the players afterwards. When Bam plays like that, when Bam is aggressive, they believe that they can beat anybody. I mean, they know they have a star who can beat anybody and who can win in that building. We've seen that repeatedly, right? But Bam is the X factor. Okay, Tatum and Brown are going to play at a certain level, even if with Tatum it's going to bounce from here to here at times. Okay, sometimes in the same game. We saw that in Game 6 against Philadelphia. Awful for 3 quarters, great in the fourth. But we also know what Jimmy's going to be. Doesn't have to be 35 a game, Jimmy. It could be 28 a game, Jimmy, as we saw in the last series. Bam is the variable. Okay, Bam has gotten his numbers back up to where they were in the regular season, closer to where they were for the first 2/3 of the regular season. He's now averaging 18 and 9 with 4 assists. He was 20 and 9 and 3 assists in the regular season. He's shooting 50%. He shot 54% in the regular season. But it's not just about numbers. It's about demeanor. It's about disposition. We've talked about this so many times. If they can get a Bam series here, they can win it. Because I think the role guys are going to be pretty good in this series. They've played against this team before. They know how to get shots against this team, even though, again, Boston, when they lock in, can be very good defensively. Max Strus, I think, is going to have a very good series. You can see him kind of as the last series went on, get more and more and more comfortable. He's not afraid of these kind of moments. He's had big games in that particular building. This is on Bam. This is on Bam. This is to me, this is a legacy series for Bam that comes up as a turtle buzz. I do all this defending of you, and this is how you act, LA Mail. You don't want me to pick them. Trust me, you don't want me to pick them, but I might. I'm on the edge. They made me on Channel 7 pick on top of my head yesterday. I said Celtics in 7, but we'll see. And then this comes from Alan. Denver's going to pulverize the Lakers. I got no feel for that series whatsoever. Nuggets should win that series. They're better than the Lakers, I believe. They have the best player in that series. I know that's sacrilege to say, but I think at this point of his career, their careers, Jokic is the best player in that series. Murray's terrific in these kind of situations. But I don't know. If AD's healthy, I think they're going to give them problems. Jordan, Highsmith is next factor as well. I mentioned that. I think Highsmith is going to get minutes in this series. So if you're looking at minute distribution, a little bit less Love, whether he starts or not. I don't know about Zeller. I don't know that there's a matchup for Zeller in this series, but if Love starts, he'll play. But I do think Highsmith is going to get more of a turn in this particular series. All right, this is just a precursor for everything. We're going to have more content on the network over the next couple of days, putting out episodes. Amy Audibert from The Heat is going to be joining us the next couple of days on 5 on the Floor, probably bringing in a national NBA guest as well. Make sure you check out all the rest of our content. We had full coverage from the Marlins-Reds series here as well. Also, of course, the Panthers are opening this week against Carolina. Alex Baumgartner is going to be covering that for us, and then Dolphins coverage off of their mini camps as well. Thanks to our sponsors, All Pro Construction Builders. Thanks also to Prize Picks. Use the code 5, FIVE. Well, we thank Prize Picks because sometimes they help us make money. You should make money there as well. Have a good day, everybody.